Welcome to the Say Network podcast. I'm Megan Villalpando, and I'm here with Jim Sparks.
Hello.
Abraham Guevara.
Hi.
And we have a really great episode for you guys today. We've decided to do this episode specifically for anyone who works with youth on a regular basis. You could be a paid youth worker, a volunteer youth leader, maybe you just mentor youth at your core. It doesn't matter. This episode is for you. And kind of the idea behind it is, you know, we live in a culture where kids are more connected nowadays to what's happening in the world than ever before. They know more about what's going on with current events, and they have a lot of questions about just what's going on in the world in general. And as a youth leader, it can be a really like a major challenge to try and figure out how to approach some of these more controversial or difficult topics, or even political questions that kids might come at you with, because sometimes you show up to work or to youth group and you just never know what the kids are going to ask you. So in this episode, we're going to sit down with Francisco Villalpando. Yes, that is my husband. And also...
That was our disclosure statement.
Full disclaimer. And also Ismael Lopez.
Not my husband.
True. And we're going to talk about not just talk about why it's important to discuss these topics with your youth, but how, in a practical sense, we can actually go about discussing kind of these more difficult topics. But before we get into the episode, we want to take a minute and talk about a youth culture resource with you. So, Abraham, what do you have for us?
This better be good. So I read a book. This may come as a shock to many of you.
Did you listen to the book or did you read it?
I listened to the book. That counts.
I saw it on your eyeballs. I saw it in your eyeballs that you didn't actually read it. I 100% support you, by the way. My kids give me a hard time and say, you don't read books. I go, well, I listen to them. They're like, that's not the same thing.
I still got the information, and that's all that matters,
That's
right?
what I'm saying.
It's a really good book. It's called Contagious, and I recommend it to all of you. But there was the idea was basically how to make ideas, how to make things spread, or what makes things spread. The book basically looked into like viral sensations or books or just information that gets out and how it gets out. And there was 6 kind of like keys that they went into. I'm not going to go into all 6, just kind of the ones that I think apply a little bit to ministry. Because when I hear these books, automatically I think, how can this apply to ministry, or how can it apply to what I do? And so I guess what I work in is typically the dissemination of information and getting stuff out. And how do we make it stick with people? How do we make it a spread? You know. So, anyways, one of the key steps that they went into in this book was the idea of social currency. Does this, when something has social currency, it spreads. People like to show that they're smart. So when there's a new piece of information, people will spread it to make them look smarter, or if it makes them look richer, people will spread the information. So I was thinking to myself of like, what is, and I don't know the answer to this, but what is like a way we could use social currency in getting the message of what we preach to stick, you know? How can it, I don't know. What do you guys think about this? Does it apply or does it not apply? Is there something there?
I've done a lot of reading about social currency because I found it fascinating. I think Douglas Rushkoff was the first time I heard that term. But as youth workers, well, even as just adults and just hanging out, you want to have social currency because you want to feel included. You want to be part of a group. You want to be in the know. Like when we're in the department and you guys are talking about the Avengers and all that stuff, I got nothing.
Correction, the guys are talking about the Avengers.
Well, that's true. And when the ladies and me talking about sports, like you have no social capital. An example is yesterday, Dave in our department is excited. He's building a computer because that's what he do. And he got like a fan. It looked like a fan to me. And he's frothing. Abraham's frothing. Bob is frothing. And I'm like, I couldn't be happy for him because I didn't know what that was. And it
was amazing.
I know. And and look, I'm happy for you guys that you were so excited about a fan, but you miss out. You're not part of it. And I think as youth workers, the way to have social currency with kids, because the problem is it being in youth work, you get older, your group doesn't get older that you're with. They may age out, but you still got another group that's that age. You're still dealing with the same age group. And the older you get, the harder it is to have that social currency. When you were younger and you were probably more hip, allegedly, then you knew that stuff. You probably even listened to it or you watched that kind of stuff. But as you get older, you're like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to hear that. So you have to do a little extra work. You have to do more research. You need to understand what they're talking about. You don't need to listen to all that stuff. You just need to have, what I found, you just have to have a couple nuggets. Just a surprise nugget that they're like, oh, he knows who Nipsey Hussle is that he just died. Like he knows that kind of stuff. And then you open a door immediately for that. And to me, social currency is everything in youth work. It's how you build your relationship. It's how you get in. It's your door. And if you're behind, some door that you're not willing to go through or research or think they're just going to like you for you and stuff like that, you're kind of crazy in my opinion.
How is social currency defined? Like for people listening, like what is like the general definition for social currency?
I have something that I feel of value that I want to talk about. You have the same feeling of value for that, and that now you're going to exchange those things, and you're adding to each other's conversation. That's basically my understanding of it. I have something to give. And in that conversation. And so for me, like I just want a couple nuggets just so that they know that, hey, I'm paying attention to their world. And because I don't want to live in their world. I can't watch any of that stuff or listen to that stuff. It's bothersome to me, but I need to know what it is. And then if they feel like you have any sort of relevancy in their world, then they're going to talk to you. Then you're going to be able to have the conversations that we're going to talk about. Because they feel like, hey, you're not like the other adults. You know something that I know.
There's levels to this, though. It's like you want to have enough to where you can talk with them, but not like get like into it too deep to where now you look like you're just trying to put up a front or something like that.
Sure. Well, there is that fine line. Like what kids don't want is for you to be cool. Right.
It's like that video.
And if you think you're cool, you're out. And so like if you're like, oh well, yeah. And so a good example, this happened a long time ago. This was at Divisional Youth Councils in Southwest. They had a speaker and he was talking about youth culture stuff. I'll just say that. Except it's exactly what he's talking about. Everyone knew who it was. But he started bragging for some reason, like he knew famous people. I don't know why he did this, because he was trying to be cool is what he was trying to do. And he accidentally mixed up Nelly Furtado and Nelly.
That's funny.
He got him backwards, which you could understand that mistake. They both named Nelly. And these kids from Vegas called him out on it on stage, and he was the guest speaker. They're like, you don't know what you're talking about. And the guy lost his mind up on stage, and he goes, you don't know. I hang out with all these famous people. He was like, I hang out with blah, blah, blah. And I was like, Mayday, right? He's going down. And that's what it is. It's because your job's not to be cool. Your job is to get to know them and hang out with them. And so for me, just have that little bit of social currency so they know that you know something. And they'll be that also from a discipline standpoint, they're a lot more careful what they say. Because, when you're young, you try to say things, do they really know? And I'm like, hey, I know what you're talking about. Then they're like, no, you don't. And then you give just a little nugget. And they're like, oh. And then they're a lot more careful.
I feel like I get a little social currency when I smash a kid at Street Fighter, like in the youth room, and just demolish him and just drop the controller.
I find it's best to, you destroy him once. And then you walk away. And they're like, oh, I want to do it again. No. I'm good. And then you've reached pinnacle status.
There was two other things I wanted to get into. Well, basically the 6 words, social currency. Does it make people look? How does it make people look talking about an idea? That's what makes an idea contagious. Another is triggers. He used the example of the song Friday. Remember that song? He says that Rebecca Black song from a few years ago. Right. So right now, me even saying that's the word Friday, people will start singing, and that's a trigger. So that thing got so embedded that the word Friday, the day Friday, became like a trigger. They even said that on YouTube when you see the the song spike. It's always on Friday. People will send it to each other, you know, because there's a trigger there with the idea spreading, and that's why it's one thing that helps it spread.
Awful song.
It is an awful song, but it is like billions, right, of views already. And the other one is this one was interesting. It was public. Can people see when they're using your product? Is it observable? And he used the example of the Live Strong bracelet. It was a cheap little yellow bracelet that spread like wildfire because it meant something, and everybody was wearing it. And so all of a sudden, everybody wanted to jump in, and so it became contagious, right? And he said that the initial idea for raising awareness for, I believe it was cancer, he said that they wanted to do this bike race across the country. That was the initial idea. And it was like, this is going to be great, and everybody's going to like get in on this. But somebody suggested the bracelet. He says because he had seen Nike selling a similar kind of bracelet. And he goes, why don't we just do that? We sell these bracelets, and people will sponsor, you know, cancer or whatever. And initially they kind of put the idea off because it was too simple, but then they went with it because it was cheaper. And people automatically were like, well, that person, obviously they contributed somehow to the cause. That's why they have the bracelet. Why do you have that bracelet? You know, it was all these things, and eventually it got contagious. He even talked about like the mustache with Movember, how like all of a sudden these dudes were popping up with these mustaches, and it became like a fad, and people were like, why are you wearing that? And you know, guys were saying it's to raise awareness or whatever. And so it was a public kind of display that people began to get in on, and eventually the idea became very contagious. Anyways, it was just it's a really cool book, and it gets you going, gets your brain going. So
it's good.
We'll link it in the show notes.
We'll link it in the show notes.
Oh, because they need more advertising.
Yeah, well, it's contagious.
Full circle. Well done.
All right. Well, as I mentioned before, we have two guests with us. We have Francisco and we have Ismael. Can you guys tell us just a little bit about your experience as a youth pastor? Like, how long were you a youth pastor, or are you a youth pastor? What type of youth do you work with? What age groups? And maybe just like, why did you get into youth ministry in the first place?
Well, I started working with the youth 2006. So I've been working with the youth for about 13 years, but officially at the core, like as a paid worker, since 2011, I think. So and I've got I work usually with high school and college age kids, and I started youth work as I started as a youth worker just because, you know, I can relate to them, especially back then. And I've always had a heart for the underprivileged, and especially in our community, there's a lot of, you know, just things going on. You know, just we live in if you've been to Santa Ana, we're like where the core is, it's located in like literally like the middle of Santa Ana, but our core is surrounded by apartments, by homes. So I mean, we're just surrounded by a bunch of communities. So there's a lot of things that growing up, I lived around that area, so I knew. So I knew kind of the struggles of our teens and our youth. So I got to a point where I felt like God was calling me because I felt that I can make an impact in the lives of the youth. So I mean, initially that's why I started youth work, because of the need that I saw in our community, and because I felt like that I can provide something, and I can, just share my knowledge and just, spread my love for the youth. So yeah, that's the reason I got into it, and I've been doing it since then, and I love it. I'm still passionate. I'm probably even more passionate now than I was before. Yeah, and I've worked under, this will be my third official officer. And I'll be into my fourth official officer, I think, by the beginning of next year. And it's funny because every officer that comes into the Corps, he says, "Oh, when are you going to become when are you going to go to training school? When are you going to become an officer?" And I always say, "Hey, it's not my calling. My calling is youth work." So, I have a passion for the youth. Yeah.
Yeah. So I started working as a youth pastor at the Long Beach Citadel Corps in November of 2013. Sorry, October 2013, and then actually completed 5 years as a youth pastor, and then I ended up transitioning out of a youth pastor role in November of 2018. So I was working for 5 years as a youth pastor in the city of Long Beach, and the age groups that we work with was elementary age all the way up to high school, and then even some like college age groups. And specifically, we work with a lot of underprivileged inner city youth, a lot of minority kind of demographics. And the main reason, I guess one of the main reasons why I got into youth ministry, youth work, I think in part it was like a kind of like a calling, or at least at that time, to work specifically as a youth pastor. But it was somebody in my life. I have a mentor that was my youth pastor as well. He played such an important role in my life, in my walk with Christ, in my growth, in my maturity as a believer, that I just kind of felt this debt or this need to pay it forward and try to help somebody else out, help out that same person that, is just like me, or that was just like me, to help them out, to kind of mature and to get to know God more, and really just grow, essentially.
Sweet. Kids are curious.
Understatement.
As a youth pastor, you never really know what type of questions kids are going to ask you. Sometimes their questions are easy to answer, and sometimes they require some research, and sometimes they just want you to brain to explode, asking impossible questions. What are some of the more controversial or difficult topics you've discussed with your youth?
I have since I am a parent of three daughters, so it's one of my expertise being asked, just questions out of curiosity, because my daughters are always asking me questions, and sometimes they're like, weird questions that I'm not like, okay, how do I answer that? Right. So, kids do ask a lot of questions at the core. And probably some of the more controversial questions would be about suicide. They ask a lot about like homosexuality. They'll ask about, maybe not so controversial, but, like drinking. Like how many beers is it okay for you to drink, especially in the Army, since we don't drink. Right. And so those kind of questions, sometimes I have an answer right away, because, I've been asked before, or sometimes I have to go and do a little bit of research, or sometimes I'll just straight out tell them, I don't know. Like there's some questions that I don't know, like that I need to find the answers to. And, but I've never like, what's it called? I've never ignored a question, like anytime they ask a question, I always want to make sure that, that, okay, well, I'm going to look into your question, and then we're going to talk about it. And so there's always some kind of answer. There's, I know your answer. I know the answer. Or we can look at the answer, or, what? I don't know how to answer you.
That's good. Paco?
I think some of the tough questions that I've been asked have been things like, why does God hate gay people? Or other stuff like, what about evolution? Is that real? I'm learning that in school. Does God actually exist? Is that a thing? Is it real? I've been asked a lot of like those type of questions, and those like what's interesting is that those are questions that even as adults, like people still end up kind of having. And I guess in some ways the way that I think about that is that maybe in the past, if they grew up in the church, maybe they just weren't given a good answer. Therefore, they kind of carry those type of things, into their adulthood. But yeah, one thing that I've tried to do is encourage those difficult questions. I think the church needs to be the place where those tough questions, can be kind of brought out to light. Can be asked. And if the church isn't open to hearing those questions, the world essentially, when they go to school, when they go to college, they'll hear those questions. They'll hear like these, kind of arguments against maybe Christianity or whatnot, against, kind of biblical positions on things. And they may not be prepared, if we don't prepare them for those.
Right.
And for me, one of my favorite answers when it's a super difficult question and I don't have an answer, and it's, I always tell them that we're not supposed to know everything. Our God is a God of mystery. So there are certain things that as human beings we're not capable of understanding. And this is where a lot of times where I kind of tie the faith into, your walk. And I always say, well, I don't know your answer. I don't know the answer. I might never know the answer. You might never know the answer, but this is where, your relationship with God comes into play. This is where you can grow your faith. And this is where an opportunity for you to, really just depend on God and then depend on his wisdom. So that's one of the things I always kind of fall on, like when it's a difficult situation. And like Paco says, they'll ask you about, why does God hate gay people, or why does God allow evil things to happen, or specific questions about like, why did my dad die? Why did this happen to me? So there's a lot of times where, I've dealt with a lot of, over the past 13 years, there's been a lot of just difficult situations with our teens, from like suicide, attempted suicide, rape, even murder and stuff. So it's been, a lot of times there is no answer to their questions. So I always just kind of say, hey, we just have to kind of rely on God's wisdom. And sometimes we're just not meant to know things, and I know in the Bible says, like when we're up in heaven, it's kind of like our mind will expand and we will know certain things, and it's kind of like an aha moment, So I always say, what, this is temporary, but in heaven you can ask all the questions you want and you'll probably get all the answers.
I always find it weird when they're asking you a question and right away it's got like a whole agenda right behind it, or it really much involves them in every way, shape, or form, and how to sensitively answer that, particularly if that what you're going to say is in complete opposition of what they're hoping that you would say. That's a challenge. You guys run into that where it's like just plain obvious. You're like, I know what's going on here, and I got to be very careful on how I answer that.
Yeah, I think so. And I think it also depends on who asks you the question. Like if it's like somebody that just came to church, as opposed to somebody that's been at church for a long time. You have
if it's that kid you don't like.
Yeah. No, but I mean, you have to be wise about the way you answer the question, because even the same question can be answered differently depending on the person that's asking the question.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think for me, like there's been times where like there's that one kid, like you said, that has a specific agenda, that already has like his mind made up, in terms of this, or he's trying to just be a troll or trigger you to something. Usually what I do is like, if I know the kid well enough, I'll just kind of be more like, bold, or I don't know if necessarily bold is the right word, but I'll just be like, okay, like I know what you're doing. Mm-hmm. Do you really want to answer, or are you just trying to kind of troll, and if they, and usually they'll kind of like say, at least in my experience, they'll be like, and I'm just kind of messing with you or whatever. And I'm like, all right, just shoo them away or whatever. Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
I know. I always get it like, you were talking about like those justification type things, like questions, and like how far is too far. Yeah. I get that question all the time when I'm teaching. And like, well, like if I'm with my girlfriend, like how far is too far? I'm like, if you're asking that question, you're probably gone too far. like they're trying to split hairs a lot of times. It makes it challenging to give a proper answer.
How do we I remember those moments, and like how do we avoid getting into like that territory of like you start, all right, too far is all right here, like you want to respond to that, all right, here's what's too far, and you start giving them like layouts. How do you avoid getting into that, like, yeah,
because that's like
legalism.
Yeah. How do you avoid it? Because it's natural. I think it's pretty natural to want to go there, but how do we avoid that? What do you think?
I've I don't know, like I said, it depends on like your audience, I guess.
Yeah.
Because there's certain kids that want to hear a number, or they want to know like a specific fact.
Yeah.
And there's some kids that you can kind of be general about it, and they'll kind of take your word for it. You know, so I mean, I think it depends on who's asking the question, because everybody takes the information differently. Like, I mean, when I'm preaching or when I'm doing like a Bible study or a youth class, you know, and one of the things that I like to do is, you know, when we talk about what we learned, everybody has a different take on what I taught, even though it was the same information, everybody, you know, receives it differently. Yeah. But when it's on one-on-one, like if it's a person that comes to you after class and, you know, specifically asks you, like, I think it's really important for you to know who they are before you answer their question. Yeah. Because some of them can take it completely wrong. Yeah. You know, I had a kid one time. This is when I was starting as a youth worker, and he was having problems with drugs. You know, he was doing a lot of, like, not hard drugs like marijuana. So, you know, I found out he was doing it from somebody else. I came and I talked to him, and then I said, hey, you know, I heard this is what's going on, and, you know, you want to talk about it. So we talked about it. So I thought that the best solution, you know, and I thought that his parents would be supportive if I was to go approach his parents, and talk to his parents about, you know, like the issue. Yeah. So I did, and I called his parents into a meeting. It was me and my core officer and another youth worker. So we called his parents and, hey, you know, we want to help you out. We like your teen, your son is going through these problems. And I thought, like, they were gonna be like, oh yeah, thank you for letting me know. You know, let's work on it. And the following week they were out of church. They had left.
Well, they just completely left.
Yeah, they were so mad that I talked to them about, and, you know, I guess I didn't know that's the way they were. So I thought I was like, okay, I'm trying to help out, and at the end I felt really bad because it was like a big family too. They left church because, you know, in a way I guess I didn't approach it correctly, and so that always kind of stuck to me. So I always want to know who's talking to me before I give some kind of answer. Like, sometimes it's like you said, I don't want to step into legalism, but sometimes that's the kind of mentality that they have. And that's the only way that they'll sometimes...
Those are the future engineers.
they like some kids just want to know numbers.
Right.
Or criminals.
Stats
or criminals.
Yeah. True.
Yeah, or lawyers.
Don't rule them out.
Future lawyers.
Have you guys had a question that usually comes from a younger person that they're asking you a question and you think they're asking you this incredibly deep, like, profound question, and you've got this, like, really long answer for them, and they were like, it was something opposite, something very easygoing? Have you guys run into that? Anybody?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. I was just laughing because, like, I was recounting a story with my son, and we saw a kid. I mean, it was like a late teenager, maybe early 20, and he was walking across the sidewalk, and he was doing all this kind of stuff, and the hand gestures really sharp. And so my son, he was 8 at the time, and he goes, what's with that guy? I go, you know, mental health issues are a very serious thing. And I went into this long talk about mental health and how the effect of drugs could enable all of that stuff. And he's like, or he could have just had a bunch of bees around him.
Oh my God.
I was like, yeah, I probably didn't need to have that whole long talk and just gone with the bees approach. But yeah, have you ever run into that? Do you have any stories of that? If not, that's fine. We could edit it out.
A similar thing happened to me, not with the youth, but with my daughter as well. She was asking, I don't know, she was, I don't know what she was talking about. And I was kind of like, she was talking about a boy. And she was 7 years old, you know, and if I knew that my questions or would lead to what she said after, I would have, like, not said anything. So she was talking about a boy, and I was like, she's my middle child, and so she said, oh yeah, she was talking to her mom about a boy, like a cute boy that she saw at school, and I was like, and I overheard, and I said, Zoe, sorry, that's not her name. And then so I said, hey, you have a crush on the boy, and then she said, oh yeah, and then I was like, oh okay, well, you know, you're too young to date. And she was like, well, yeah, I know, but, you know, I mean, I still think he's cute. And I was kind of taken back, and I was like, okay, well, you're way too young to date, and you can't be thinking about boys at this time. Like, and I was just joking with her, and I said, I need you to live with me like my whole life. And then she said, oh, so you don't want me to get married? And I was like, well, no, I mean, you can get married, but not now. Oh, so you don't want me to have a husband? And I was like, no. So do you want me to be a lesbian?
Oh, no.
And I was like, no.
You're like, I got to go to the store.
Yeah. And I mean,
she's smart.
I didn't follow up with the question because I didn't want to go into the whole discussion of homosexuality.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, does she know what a lesbian is? But like, I understand sometimes that's happened to me with me in youth ministry, where sometimes they want something simple and just something factual, and then we turn it into like this big old 20-minute discussion. And
because we also like to talk. I mean, if you're a teacher or a preacher, you like to have conversations. You like to, it's like something you like to enjoy doing, and so you're just like, well, let me tell you, and then it's like, I didn't want to know all that.
It's funny. Why is it important that youth pastors and core officers and just people in ministry, why is it important to address these more controversial, difficult topics? I mean, you guys have talked about suicide. I mean, that's as difficult as it gets. So why is it important that we're the ones? Paco, you said it's important that the church talks about this. So why?
Yeah, I think it's important that the church talks about it, because if we don't talk about it, somebody else will, with them, whether that's at school or, when they go off to college or whatever. So if we're not kind of like equipping them with kind of a biblical answer, like maybe like a godly answer or whatever we want to call it, then I think it's possible that we're doing them a disservice by doing that. I think one of like my favorite kind of stories like in the scripture is when like the woman's caught like in adultery, and so they these like religious teachers or whatever, they bring the lady to Jesus, right, and they're like telling him basically like all of all the bad stuff that she's done, and Jesus almost seems like just not even bothered, he's just like doodling on the ground. He's not shocked like whatsoever. And they kind of keep pressing the issue, and he's just like whatever. He's just kind of like brushing it off. I think in a sense like our approach should be that way when it comes to like the church. When kids bring difficult issues to us, like we shouldn't be shocked by them. If anything, we should be addressing kind of like these difficult topics, and have it be like in a safe environment, safe place, so that when they do go out into the world, and when they do get asked the difficult questions, like they're not shocked. They don't feel like their entire, faith has been completely like, shaken, and, they feel like everything that they've believed is a lie. Because unfortunately, that's just the way that, kind of people take it, to that extreme. But if we address it within the church, then I think it helps. It provides, some kind of like reassurance, and makes it easier for them to kind of, provide an answer.
I agree with you. I think that kids are getting information from so many different sources, like you say, at school, on TV, from their friends, different things, from teachers. There's all these like voices kind of speaking into their lives. Don't we want the church to be, in that mix? We want that to be an authoritative, trusted voice that like they're taking into their into account while they're kind of formulating their thoughts and their opinions on this. Like we want the church as part of that discussion,
Yeah, and it is difficult. It's difficult for everybody. But yeah, we have to give that biblical view on those topics, and I think if we're able to talk about that kind of stuff, then there brings a next level of comfort and trust between that youth and you, to be able to come to you in more times of need, because they know that you're not willing to, that you're willing to talk about that kind of stuff. It's critical. I think it's critical. And I think, we're scared, but maybe we practice what we preach. We're always telling the kids to go out by faith, lead by faith and all that stuff. But we need to step out in faith and trust that God's going to speak through us in those situations and give us the right words.
Cool. So we're talking about practicality. How do you deal with, like, you maybe give me a story or an example. How do you deal with like the hard topics? One I like when we get into like biblical dilemmas or biblical like morality. So like slavery in the Bible or like issues like that. You know what I mean? Like, how do you, or it doesn't have to be that one specific, but like, how do you prepare for a topic like, or politically charged topic like gun violence or anything like that? How do you think about that? I mean, you don't have to give me like a story on that specific one, but is there, in general, how would you prepare practically? And if you have a story.
For me, like when it comes to especially the Old Testament, right?
Yeah.
The Old Testament is very controversial. And when you said slavery.
Yeah.
And then like one of the things that like the youth will always ask me is about like Jewish tradition. They would always drink wine.
Right.
Like Jesus drank wine. So then they ask me, why can't we drink? You know, why can't we drink alcohol? So I mean, sometimes I'll just be very practical and I'll do research like on the specific topic. Like I was reading an article and it talked about the difference between alcohol back then and the difference between alcohol now, and it's very, very, very what's it called? It's the concentration of alcohol now. It's like it's potent. It's very strong compared to the alcohol back then. So that's, I mean, something practical that I'll be like, you know what? Okay, let's kind of just, we'll talk a little bit about like the historical part and you know, why it's a different culture now. So sometimes when I can give that kind of answer, because kids always want to hear something that makes sense to them, you know? So if I was to just say, oh, well, just because we can't, you know, then they'll have more questions or they'll have more doubts. So anytime I can like bring some facts and like do a little bit of research like on like the historical part of that issue, then I think that sometimes a lot of times that kind of eases their doubts or their questions. But I mean, there's questions that they ask and I don't know how to answer.
Yeah.
You know? So it stomps me. And
do you feel that pressure to answer?
Yeah, of course.
Why do you think we feel that pressure?
Because you know, as I think I think that they think we should have all the answers. Yeah. I mean, we're the leaders and, you know, they see us like up here. I was the last 2 Fridays ago, I was talking to my young adults and we were talking about, just struggles of life. And I said, you know, there's a lot of sin, you know, that I had in my life. And there's a lot of struggles even now at my age. And one of the girls said, oh, you know, I wouldn't want to hear about your sins just because, you know, I don't want to think differently about you. And I was like, okay. I mean, because she, you know, she's like, I esteem you and I see you as a leader. So like, you know, I personally wouldn't want to hear about your struggles because then I would think I think I would look at you differently. And I was like, okay. And I was teaching a class about, you know, everybody's struggles.
Yeah.
So, but I think a lot of times they see you as a person that has all the answers. So, yeah, you're pressured to answer them.
Do you feel that pressure, Bug?
You know, I did it for a long time, and but it's one of those things I think where like when you feel that pressure, you have to just ask like why. You know, like why am I feeling this way? You know, is it, you know, even sometimes I just like take some self-aware, you know, just kind of self-reflection. Is it because like, is it my pride? Is it like, you know, this expectation that people have of me? I think just as kind of the years have gone by, I feel less of that pressure. It's just been more of that thing of like, you know what, like I don't have to have all the answers and that's okay. You know, it's okay for me to not have all of the answers. It's been a lot of having to kind of just release that kind of burden of that pressure of you need to know everything. Yeah. Right. I mean, if you look at like even like, you know, these crazy biblical scholars, you know, even those guys are still wrestling with some really difficult things. You know, I'm not even close to that. You know, so if they don't know, I'll probably know much less. You know, right? And that's all right, and it's okay.
Right. Going back to the question about like preparing for controversy and preparing for like tough questions. Is there anything that you do like mentally to get yourself in the zone? Do you listen to like heavy metal music to kind of
chase chickens?
Chase chickens.
Run upstairs.
Yeah.
Hardcore music is every day.
I listen to lots of hardcore music. It really helps me out. It really soothes my soul, my spirit. I just try to do as much research as I possibly can. One of the topics that actually at our youth group we had really like the most fun and even like interaction with our youth was I taught on something called I just called it Jesus and Guns, and we talked about like try to find a biblical kind of like view of what Jesus would say about like guns or like gun ownership or whatever those type of things and what I like the most about that specific kind of topic is that like you can take just about any topic, but when you boil it down, it always goes back to like the heart of the issue, the heart of the matter. Yeah. So for us, it was kind of like looking at the scriptures, and then kind of going down to the point of like, well, is are guns the issue or is it sin? Is it people's kind of like fallen state? What's the real issue of everything? Of these kind of topics or whatever. So you can always kind of reduce it down, boil it down to those type of that type of kind of deeper kind of issue. Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah, and I think that kind of goes back a little bit. I think with something that Jim was asking earlier. I think really with some of the difficult topics, even the kids that maybe have some kind of an agenda, it's really finding out like, well, what's like the real issue? Why are you really asking me this question? Like what are you actually trying to find out, because a lot of times people will hide behind certain kind of topics or questions when they really have something else that they're struggling with or something else that they really want to ask you.
It reminds me of Jesus with the rich young ruler, right? That was like the whole thing. How do I gain eternal life?
Right.
And the heart of the question was really like, I have a lot of money and I don't want to let go of it.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
Can I still join the club?
Right. Yeah. I mean, that question was like, it sounds like a really noble question, right? How do I get there? I wanted to get there. Yeah. Right. But at the end of the day, it's like, I just don't want to get rid of my money.
Yeah. Because I see all you guys are poor. Like, how do I? Yeah.
It's the issue, dear. What's holding you back from such a plan?
Yeah. I also think about like, there's certain questions that are black and white, right? Mm-hmm. Like there's easy answers, when they, certain sins that are obvious, but there's a lot of like gray areas in the Bible, right? Like the whole I mean, at least in our culture, the Hispanic culture is also a little bit different, right? Like I know that for a fact. Even within the army, I've always had this struggle with just cultural differences, even within the army.
For sure.
Like Halloween. Yeah, that's a big one. Like Hispanic cultures, they don't celebrate Halloween. Right. Like, but the American culture,
devil's birthday, bro.
What's celebrated, right? And stuff like that is like gray areas, right? Because a lot of our leaders or officers will preach against that. Yeah, like preaching, like celebrating any kind of just thing that relates to Halloween. Yeah. And then like they'll go on Facebook and they'll see like that they're doing like a Halloween costume party at Crestmont or at camp. Yeah. And I mean, I get asked all the time, like, I thought we're not supposed to celebrate Halloween. What's up with that? So sometimes those are questions.
If you spell it backwards and you call it Neowalla, then it's totally fine.
It's totally cool.
It's totally fine.
Yeah, that's, right. I thought that was a given. Is it not?
Right. And if you drop in one testament into the candy, it's all right. It's holy as well.
Bible character.
Really, ultimately, the key word is harvest. Yeah, all of this.
That is, yeah. I think you get a free pass if you dress up as like Moses, right? And you go trick or treating or like some kind of biblical character.
Just throw harvest in, Ishmael, and you will have one wonderful party.
Yeah, but you're
100% correct.
Yeah, because even if that's my opinion, you have to be conscious about the parents.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, because I mean, we have a lot of like in our core, a lot of old school, like mentality.
Las hermanas.
Yeah.
Watch out for las hermanas.
They come from that mentality. So I mean, it's even like that has to kind of shape the way you talk to kids. Yeah. Just culturally and knowing your people.
That's a really good point, man. I like that sort of sensitivity that you have to have. Yeah, like it goes back to Paul about like it might be permissible but not beneficial, right?
Well, that, and also like I always think about the story when like the old church was eating meat that was sacrificed to idols, and Paul came back and said, hey, if you feel bad about it, don't eat it because it's sinful to you. But if you feel free to do it, then go ahead and do it.
Yeah.
But don't do it if it stumbles somebody else.
Yeah.
So those are gray areas that some people, like, there's people that can feel okay with, celebrating Halloween or drinking a beer or getting the tattoo. Right. So, those are, like, when I answer like a question, I don't know, but I'm very like thoughtful about everything. Like, I look at biblical stuff. I look at their lives. I look at our culture. I look at their parents. I mean, I try to just piece all these things together and try to give them, like, the best answer.
Like a good diagnosis. Yeah.
Yeah.
All the
But I always give them options too.
Yeah.
It sounds like preparation is super important. Like preparing, not just giving. If you don't know the answer, don't try to make up the answer. It'll be like, let me get back to you. Let me go look into this. Let me get a good answer for you.
And it's not just preparing like research. You're also doing research on the kid too. Like understanding them. And
you have to understand the child, your teen. Like, you have to understand your audience before you kind of give an answer, because you can give like I personally don't have a problem with tattoos, so but I know, like, a lot of people from our church have a problem with tattoos, and I mean, I have a couple of tattoos myself. So they'll ask me, like,
link in the show notes.
They'll say, hey, I mean, is it sinful to get a tattoo? But if I tell them, no, it's, I mean, at least from my point of view, it's not sinful. Like, I did that once, and they went to go tell their parents. Yeah. Because they wanted to get a tattoo, and then their parents were like super mad at me. So, I mean, you have to be careful with that stuff.
Preparation is key. Podcast episode number 9, season 1. Yeah. We discussed the importance of preparation with the commissioner.
I was going to say something too. Like, I don't know why I just thought about this. You were asking about the legalism kind of type of thing. I think, like, the legalistic answer, or like that, this is the limit of what you can do. Sometimes it's like the easiest answer. Yeah. It's just like, it's easy in the sense of like, well, just don't do this and you'll be fine, right? But it's like, when you dig deeper into the heart of issues, I think that's like, that should be our kind of like one of our priorities, digging deeper into the heart of the issues, why kids are asking, specific kind of questions.
It almost seems like it. Sorry, I don't to keep going. It almost seems like the more they talk, the more questions they ask, the more you learn about them. It's not just like, they're not just wanting to get information. Like, they're receiving something from you, but you're also receiving something from them. You're learning about them.
Social capital.
Boom.
Full circle.
Back all the way around.
All right. I have one more kind of question for you guys. This may or may not make it into the episode. We'll see. So you guys have been in the youth pastor business for a long time. So I want to give you a scenario, and you have 15 seconds to respond to this scenario, okay?
Well, they have to respond immediately, but they only get 15 seconds.
Yes, 15 seconds to respond.
Do we time? Okay? Do you want me to time?
Go for it.
Okay, hold on.
All right. Full disclaimer, full disclosure, these may or may not be real life situations that have happened, okay?
Who's going first?
Translation, they're all real.
Yes. Translation.
Is it just the answer?
She's experienced all of them.
Each person?
I'll ask each person.
Okay.
All right, so Ishmael, you're up first.
Oh, wow.
All right, so
nerve-wracking.
Your assistant leader is in charge of bringing food for youth group tonight, but calls in sick 30 minutes before you're supposed to start. Your budget is $20 and you have 15 people coming. What do you do?
Pizza.
Pizza. Is there a specific pizza?
Yeah, Little Caesar. That's across the street.
I feel like that's the go-to.
That's a seasoned youth pastor there.
Yeah. He didn't even hesitate. Yeah. He's like, I don't need your 15 seconds.
Yeah, pizza. And
bonus question: what's the time limit on consumption of little like before it goes bad? before it stops? Because there's a point where it's not food anymore. There's a point where Little Caesars is now just like a piece of like cardboard. So
no, that's not. Well,
it depends on the consumer.
Well, we actually have a like we have it broken down. And so if we get it like maybe half an hour, depending on who's getting it, we'll just keep it in the oven.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, keep it warm
That's
until
smart.
it's time to go out.
Life pro tips.
Yep.
There you go.
Yeah.
Actually, we said that these were real life scenarios, but there's one sentence in here that shows this one isn't actually a real life scenario because it says your budget is $20.
That's not real in the Salvation Army.
Should we clarify, is that his personal budget?
Yeah.
I was going to say, that's very generous. $20? Come on now. Yeah.
I don't know. I'd hit the taco truck pretty quick.
That sounds good too. Dang, why are we recording so close to lunch? All right, Paco, you are playing dodgeball for youth group tonight. It is the teens versus the ARC men, and things start to get pretty heated. One of the teens gets hit in the face. He stumbles and he falls through a nearby window.
This is
what
a real
do you do?
I know this one. This is a real one.
15.
This may or may not have actually happened at a core near you. What you do is you lift up the child, you pray for him, and you continue the game. Done.
Boom.
All right.
I heard
Speaking
something
from
like this
experience?
happened from, like, was it Southern Cal that this happened? Like Long Beach?
Yeah, it was just a little role reversal. The ARC guy was the one that might have or might not have gone through the window. Yes. They're over 18. They can take care of themselves. That's fine.
My question, was he out?
The question was, he was out. Yes, absolutely.
He didn't land holding the ball, because that would have been awesome.
Yeah.
All right.
He's out.
Next question. Ishmael, one of your teens brings a friend to youth group. The friend openly tells the group that she's attracted to other girls, not boys. Another member of the youth group comes up to you afterwards and tells you that she's not comfortable with the new member being at church because she likes girls. What do you do?
I mean, it's happened at the core. So, you have to be very just sensitive to both parties, right? You have to be inclusive in the sense that, everybody's allowed to come to youth group. Doesn't matter where you come from. And like this other girl, depending on how they view that situation, like for example, when this happened with this other person, I just sat down with them and I said, hey, like I know, we know, and you know where they're coming from. And I know you have your point of views. I have my point of views, but we have to look at the overall picture. This probably is the only place that they can come and might feel accepted. And, this is where, God has brought them. So, there's nothing wrong with that. Just make sure that it's very important that you make sure you listen to the other person and take in their considerations. But also, you have to be like, straightforward and don't be afraid to give a straight answer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right, Paco. One of your teens has signed up to join the military next year after graduation. They know that being in the military means that they might be asked to kill an enemy, but they aren't sure how they feel about it since the Bible says, do not murder. What is your response to them?
I think my response would be, that's part of, I guess, the job. And I think it would be good, instead of just enlisting right away and saying, this is what I'm kind of signing on for. Maybe they take some time to really think about that. Because that essentially, if it's like wartime or something on those lines, like that could be a real kind of like possibility. So I think I would probably suggest that they just take some time to kind of think about that and really kind of process that a little bit better.
All right. And then this question's for both of you. Who is Lil Pump?
It's a rapper.
Oh my God.
Well, it's an easy answer after Lil.
A cringy rapper.
Is that
yes.
That's the Gucci
yeah.
Gucci Gang?
Gucci
That's
Gang.
Mr.
Yeah.
Gucci Gang, yeah.
Gucci Gang. Doesn't write a lot of rhymes. Just
No.
one word, 2 words.
All right, you guys passed the test. Nice work. Well, thank you guys both for being here. If you're listening and if you have questions or maybe you need some advice on how to approach some of these kind of more difficult topics that we've been talking about, we encourage you to reach out to us. You can send us a message on social media at Say Network, or you can email us at our email, which is sayconnect@gmail.com. Also, if you have experience in discussing these topics with youth and have found things that have worked well, please leave us a comment so that we can share it with others. Anything we've talked about in this episode will also be linked in the show notes, and don't forget to subscribe to the Say Network podcast on iTunes for updates on new episodes. Thanks you guys for listening, and we'll be back soon with a brand new episode.